Well, Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson is enacting a hiring freeze and strictly limiting overtime to combat the city's budget woes.
Now, this is effective immediately. And by the way, it does include both the police and fire departments. Chicago facing a forecasted $223 million budget hole for the remainder of this year and a nearly $1 million, or rather billion with a B, dollar deficit next year. It's largely driven by uncertainty over how to meet a $175 million pension payment to Chicago public schools for non-teaching staff. There is also a decline in revenue from state distributed personal property replacement tax and funding for the city's new arrivals mission.
We don't want to have to cut any services. I've made that very clear. You know, I've been an organizer, I've been an elected official, and I know the damage that has been done over the course of bad decisions. But as a city, we have to be prudent and fiscally responsible in this moment. Look, I've already saved the taxpayers already $200 million. $200 million. But we have areas of need, not just in community safety, but education.
All I can say to you is that you are a disgrace. I'm an 80-year-old woman, and I've never seen anything like this. I grew up in the Jim Crow South, and the policies that you're passing in this city remind me of the Jim Crow South. I had to drink out of a colored water fountain, or the whites would drink out of a white water fountain. But you know what I didn't have to worry about? Going back to my community and it would be destroyed. And everybody else is in my community but Black people. And this is what you've done with this immigration. You have allowed all these people, you brought all these people into this city. You are destroying this city. And the Black community is flooded with all of these immigrants, violent ones, prostitution, gangs. You did that. You are doing this to your people. You are an absolute disgrace to me. Like I said, I drank out of that colored water fountain, but I could go back to that Black community that was intact. Women are crying, taxes are going up. What am I going to do with my children? Where are we going to go and live? This is because of you, Brandon Johnson. You're destroying the south side of Chicago with your policy, all under the Democratic Party. You are a disgrace.
Can anyone check if Mayor Johnson's pay will be cut? Because he made a lot of mistakes, and he expects the entire city to suffer because of it. Did you notice that he admitted to bad decisions? But when it comes time to play the blame game, he says that the entire city has to be prudent and fiscally responsible. Now, folks, if you want to see what the future holds with this vision of an open border, just look no further than Chicago. They are bleeding out their funds, and it's all because of their policies. This is the result of having Democrats lead your city. And remember that they consider themselves a sanctuary city, a badge of honor for most Democratic government officials. But it's not helping the United States citizens that are living in these kinds of cities. In fact, it's making it a living hell. And as you guys have heard, it's only making life that much harder for the living residents. Which now brings me to just how much they're spending on illegal immigrants. And guys, before we get started, thank you so much for clicking the like button. Thank you for subscribing to the channel. And I'm so glad to see so many new members joining our Patreon community. If you haven't already, click the link in the description down below so you can join our Patreon community and get early access to videos and content that unfortunately I just can't post here. Click the link in the description down below. All right, let's get started.
When you look at the fact that we spent $814,000 on a wrought iron fence during the pandemic, knowing that we have a deficit, why would you do something like that? Why would we spend over $600 million on migrants when you know we have a deficit like this? Why didn't we have a hiring freeze or start furlough days back in March and April if you knew we had a deficit like this coming? And so there was no preparation. So it's just bad decisions going forward. We just kept spending, and kept spending. And now we have a hole, and we want to blame CPS on the $223 million hole that we have this year for not paying their pension payment. However, if we had not spent $600 million on the migrants, we wouldn't have a deficit this year going forward. And so we have created this disaster that we're in, and now we want to point fingers and blame everybody else for the bad decisions that this administration has been making.
And this is a key characteristic of these sanctuary cities. They keep spending money that they don't even have. And when it comes to spending on services for the people that actually live there, suddenly they've run out of money. And then they have to make cuts on top of cuts, which makes life that much more miserable for the American taxpayers who are already struggling to keep up with the cost of living. And what's shocking to know is that these elected officials, they're going to do their best to make the lives of these other people better. Meanwhile, they forget their own constituents. To make matters worse, this mayor is now contemplating how we can make up for this deficit. Do you think he's looking at the funding for illegal aliens? Not a chance. Reports show that despite promising not to raise property taxes during his first term in office, it's possible that he hikes property taxes anyway, because they are in a hole for almost $1 billion. But it gets even worse than that, guys. Even if he does this, they'd still be facing a substantial budget shortfall, which means that there is a possibility that they renew efforts to increase city revenue by raising your taxes. Guys, this is the insanity of the left that we're going to be seeing more of if Kamala Harris wins. Scary thought, isn't it? Because they can promise us anything that we want, but it doesn't mean that they're actually going to do it. Case in point with Johnson here in Chicago. And I know that I asked this at the beginning, but don't expect government officials to take a pay cut for the crisis. And if you don't believe that they're looking to their constituents to pay for this mess, listen to what their budget director is saying.
And you have said that everything is on the table to eliminate this shortfall. And again, I want to repeat that. Everything is on the table to eliminate this shortfall. What does that mean for the city?
You know, it means that we're looking not only at, what new revenues or increased revenues that the city can bring in to support the operations, but also, taking a really hard look at, our expenditures. Right now, though we are recovering and really moving past the pandemic, our expenditures are rising at a faster rate than our revenues are. And so we have to take a good look at what are the services we're providing, what are the operations that we may no longer be able to provide without increased revenues.
Are we talking about property tax increases here? Is that one of the options?
Property tax is one of the easiest ways for the city to raise revenue, and frankly, for most municipalities to raise revenues, it's one of the largest tools that we have. And so it is something that we're looking at, but I can tell you that, property tax increases are felt differently depending upon where you live in the city. And so we want to be really mindful and careful about which revenues we are seeking to ask, the city residents to contribute to before we pull those levers.
So what did I tell you? They want you to pay for their mistakes, for their bad decisions, and expect even more of this with the Harris administration. That is, if Kamala Harris wins the 2024 presidential election. Now, we know for a fact that she's more than welcome to an open border. In fact, she's straight up promoting it. She's making it happen. But it looks like she's realizing that the American people do not want this. So she's trying her best to backtrack on most of her positions, at least verbally, because we know what she really wants. She's already told us that her values haven't changed. So even if she sings a different tune, just know, deep down in her heart, we already know what she's still trying to execute behind the scenes. I read a book a long time ago, and it basically said something that was really powerful and profound to me. And it said something along the lines of, look at your 5 closest friends, and typically your income is an average of your 5 closest friends. Now, with that being said, I was kind of like thinking, okay, well, how do I find people who made way more than me so I could increase my chances of having a higher income? I mean, it only made sense, right? For less than a cup of coffee a day, for less than $1 a day, join a powerful network of people who are ready to change their lives for the better. And I will be putting a limit on this group, so get in while you can. Be positively motivated by others who are also on the same pursuit. So I'm going to leave a link for you guys so you can join me over on the Life Pursuit Network in the description down below this video. So check it out, guys, and let's not be a victim of this great wealth transfer that is taking place right now.
So that debate was a bunch of BS. I mean, was this a debate between Donald Trump versus Kamala Harris, or a debate between Donald Trump versus Kamala Harris versus the moderators? Because the moderators were literally debating Trump and even fact-checking him. They were like, Trump, it says right here, like, that's not correct. We got a piece of paper from a manager that says, like, that's not correct. But they didn't even care to fact check Kamala Harris on the propaganda Project 2025. Yeah, it was very biased. It was so biased. And this is exactly why he has my vote. This is exactly why I'm voting for him. And y'all also noticed how Kamala Harris left her accent outside. just so fake, disingenuous, phony, very
Now, it's also being said here that her team received sample questions. They weren't the exact questions, but they covered very similar topics to what would appear in the debate.
Were you surprised how the moderators heavily weighted the debate?
Not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. I think it was what we should all have expected. We see how these people operate. You know, you look at the comments that Muir has made, you look at the comments that Lindsay Davis has made, their bias was baked in from the very beginning because they're not real journalists.
Yeah.
They are essentially these political operatives whose job it is to try to distract away from Kamala Harris's record, distract away from the serious issues that we face. Not a single question was raised about how are you going to prevent the destruction of our country and the world from nuclear war, which we are closer to than ever before. And on the eve of the Islamist terrorist attack on 9/11, they did not raise a point, a question, or a challenge about how either of these candidates will stem the spread of this radical Islamist ideology around the world and in our own country here at home, and how you would prevent this threat from continuing to grow. So, you know, they were not at all interested in informing the American people about the truth about anything. We can expect that they will continue to be propagandists for Kamala Harris.
That's the story, folks. It's Trump versus the machine at this point. And it's obvious with the ABC News debate. They're not even trying to hide it from us. Lindsay Davis, one of the moderators, is a sorority sister of Kamala Harris. Now, you would think that given this conflict of interest that she would say no to the debate, but that didn't happen. In fact, she doubled down and she went to work for Harris. We know that Trump got fact-checked multiple times by both her and David Muir. With that, both journalists have undergone scrutiny from their peers as they found this to be extremely biased. The backlash has led Lindsay Davis defending their actions, although she might have actually made it worse. So according to her, the decision to fact-check Donald Trump was because Biden did so poorly in their debate that he had to back out of the presidential race. In her words, she said the people were concerned that statements were allowed to just kind of hang and not be disputed by the candidate Biden at the time or the moderators. Can you believe that? So basically, she took it upon herself to defend Kamala Harris in real time because she didn't want her to end up like Biden. Now, I'm not really sure how that works out because she's not running for president, but she sure did get $1 million paycheck from Kamala Harris to be the moderator. I wonder if that might have influenced her decision. This is Kamala using talking points, but at the same time trying to appear as if she's talking off the cuff. Now, I want you guys to realize that ABC set up this interview, and they're probably just as surprised as the rest of us that Kamala Harris continues to use the exact same answer when asked about the economy. You know, I grew up as a middle class, you know the spiel. She's pushing for the narrative that Donald Trump doesn't have a plan. She said it multiple times in the debate. And this is a classic, if not best example of gaslighting, because it is crystal clear and obvious that she's the one that doesn't have a plan because she can't even explain her plan for the economy. Now, just imagine her getting interviewed by multiple reporters and even fielding questions from everyday Americans. It's not going to be a pretty sight, but it's something that Donald Trump does regularly. Now, some within mainstream media are obviously biased against the former president. However, it doesn't end there. They're also openly saying that anyone who supports Donald Trump is just as bad as he is.
Also to do things, Ellie, that one would think are career-ending. The way he desecrated Arlington National Cemetery would be career-ending for a normal politician. His constant lies. But even this piece about saying, well, my building was the tallest until, you know, they brought down the World Trade Center. Now it's the second tallest. I mean, everything he does is despicable.
The reason why it doesn't end his career is because his supporters are just as despicable. All right. Like Trump's whole thing, he's a narcissist, right? And so his whole thing is to have a complete lack of compassion and empathy for everybody else. It's all about him. That's why he lies about 9/11. It's all about him, me. He's probably the least compassionate president we've had in 200 years since Andrew Jackson. And it works for him because his supporters are just as ungenerous and have just as little compassion and empathy for others. So when he is seen out there, essentially, as you guys have put it, desecrating our national symbols, when he is seen out there putting himself above all else, his supporters also want that to be the case. They want to do that in their own lives. That's how they think of themselves. And that's why it never hurts Trump when he takes these crass and classless actions. It's because his supporters think that being crass and classless is actually kind of cool.
Now, I'm not sure what Don King is doing here, but these are the same outlets that lie about Trump 24/7, which could explain why Jake Tapper is digging into this entire mess. So what do the Democrats do? Well, they up the inflammatory rhetoric and hope that somebody takes out Trump. I mean, we just saw the second assassination attempt on the former president, guys. Ryan Ruth, the suspect who hid out in the bushes at Donald Trump's West Palm Beach golf club, waiting for his shot at the ex-former president. AK-47 style rifle at the ready. Serial number filed off. This wasn't some 20-year-old without a political paper trail. Kind of like the first would-be assassin, Thomas Crooks. In fact, Ryan Ruth, 58 years old, frequently posted about politics on X and other social media, had a Biden-Harris sticker on his truck, and exclusively donated to Democratic candidates and causes dating all the way back to 2019. He even featured in a New York Times story last year, highlighting his efforts to recruit Afghan soldiers to fight against Russia in Ukraine. He was willing to fight in the Ukraine himself, but the Ukrainians didn't want him or his dubious recruits. In short, we got a very motivated man of action, and he was prepared to kill for a cause. And Democrats basically painted a target on former President Donald Trump with their dangerous rhetoric. As Ruth wrote in a tweet, democracy is on the ballot and we cannot lose. You know what that sounds like? Every Democrat in the DNC. I mean, just take a look at the kind of things that they're saying about the former president. Just days after the first assassination attempt, the anti-Trump Lincoln Project was again comparing Trump to Hitler. On July 19th, Democratic Senator Martin Heinrich, he called Trump an existential danger to our democracy. And even in the presidential debate, Kamala Harris accused Donald Trump of attacking the foundations of our democracy. Now, when you listen to Democrats or tune in to MSNBC, they make you feel like the country is teetering on the edge of dictatorship. And if you're anything like Ryan Ruth, you probably say that if there were ever a moment for preemptive action, it's now. I mean, I don't understand why Democrats just don't get their own double standard. You see, for Democrats to condemn political violence while making their supporters believe that all freedoms are lost if Trump wins isn't just hypocritical, it's irresponsible. Progressives need to find a way to challenge Donald Trump without fueling paranoia or pushing those who act impulsively over the edge. Trump's already facing threats to his life. I mean, just imagine what could happen if he wins. On election night, what will people who truly believe he's a dictator do? Trump mentioned a bloodbath, and unfortunately, he may turn out to be right again. Now, honestly, guys, do you feel safe in America right now? So yeah, now that the dust is finally settling after the first debate between Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris, we see the real situation reveal itself. The political elites, they're just plain oblivious to how Kamala Harris missed the mark in achieving her goals big time. I mean, sure, you got most mainstream media, news outlets and channels saying that Kamala Harris won, but when you look really closely, it's the political elite, including a number of famous Republicans, completely misreading what happened in the confrontation between the ABC News Harris team and their sole opponent, President Donald Trump. You know what the American people saw? Well, let me tell you guys. Every Trump supporter and many independents saw the blatant bias of ABC's moderators, who appeared less like neutral hosts and more like active debaters helping Harris take on President Trump. Needless to say, guys, viewers are outraged. I've even heard some people outright condemn both ABC and Vice President Harris. Now, one comment online said ABC didn't have to give her the questions. She was clearly giving them the questions. Considering the fact that one of Kamala Harris's close friends runs ABC News only reinforces this idea. For a lot of Americans, the fix was in and the whole thing was rigged. Now, let me tell you guys, the people know what's what. Trump supporters, they make up about 48% of Americans who feel that there is a corrupt establishment trying to control their lives and rip them off. The obvious bias displayed by ABC News during the debate, it didn't help convince them otherwise. In fact, the whole thing only reinforced their beliefs and basically solidified Harris as part of that establishment. Now, I personally know people both in our comments and in real life that are basically downright furious about the debate, and they're frustrated by how Harris seemed to underestimate their intelligence. Harris didn't help their case either. Instead, the vice president spent much of her time pulling faces and trying to look cute for the audiences at home. And if you guys watched the whole thing, you would see how her behavior came across more like that of a spoiled teenager than a potential commander-in-chief of the country. Now, again, this is the political elites at work, guys. You see, the elites, they tend to prioritize style over substance, and they expect everyone to play along as if they're at some fancy Washington cocktail party. But we know better. Which reminds me of a previous live stream that I did where I discussed how Donald Trump absolutely demolished her in the debate. This is because of her constant flip-flopping just to pander to voters. In fact, it's actually led many analysts to believe that Donald Trump didn't just win the debate. He may have already won the election. Guys, make sure you guys watch that video right after this one. As always, thank you for clicking the like button. Thank you for subscribing to the channel, and I'll see you guys on the next one.